Sinisterism is about finding the primal aspects of the left-hand path, primal in history, primal in the psyche, thus obtaining truth. Thomas Leroy.
Greetings, my friends, and welcome back to your dose of sinister heathenry. But for those new to the channel, I'm Thomas Leroy, founder of the International Left-Hand Path organization, the Sect of the Horn God. The sect is an educational foundation created to not only make those with a black flame aware of its glow, but to also restore the shadow aspects to the ancient gods by going deep into the past, not only historically, but also psychologically. For the primal depths of the psyche are limitless. So, if this sounds interesting, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And if you want to learn more, join the organization, the Sect of the Horn God, at the link down below. Thank you. Now, sometimes I wonder if I'm a pagan who at times delves into the occult, or am I an occultist who dabbles in paganism? Now, in the past, I've referred to myself as a dark pagan, or a pagan of the left-hand path. But I would have to say, truthfully, I'm an occultist first and foremost. And the reason for that is I'm trying to uncover that which is not easy to reveal, if you will, the esoteric. And that's the difference between the two, between the occult and paganism. The occult is esoteric. Paganism is exoteric. Thinking about it, a good metaphorical analogy of the two would be you have the tree, the great world tree, Yggdrasil. Yggdrasil is exoteric, while the pool of Erd, out of which Yggdrasil grows, is esoteric. And Mimir's well would be a deeper form of esotericism. And looking at this from, let's say, the psychological perspective, you can say these are different levels of the psyche. Now, paganism is very much on the surface. It is a product of the ego mind, if you will. It survives simply in objective reality. There is no depth to modern paganism. There might be a few groups out there, esoteric, who have an esoteric bent to them. But on a whole, it is simply a means to fill a vacancy in the hearts of those who have left their church. They need to fill that God-shaped hole. And what they don't realize, these modern pagans and the modern fucking Druids, is they are still playing within the framework or by the rules of the Christian ethos. They believe they're delving into the past to, let's say, resurrect the gods, but in truth they're simply observers. They're they're safe from the hidden darkness in those very gods they claim to revere. Instead, from afar, they project the face of Jesus upon those deities because he's still at the foundation of their spiritual perspective, if you will. Ask practically any one of them what they do. Love, light, humility, compassion, all those attributes of Christian slave morality are in their lexicon when describing their practice. Thus they put words in the mouths of the gods, portraying them as what they want them to be instead of what they truly are. If you want truth from the corpses of the deities you dug up, you have to be a necromancer instead of a fucking ventriloquist. And let the gods say what they want to say. To put it simply, why this way of thinking, this interpretation of the practices of the ancients frustrates me so much is because I want to know. I don't want to believe. And to know, you have to delve into the esoteric. You have to go beyond the surface. You have to go deep. Anyway, the following are 3 videos I made on the topic of modern paganism, druidism, and so on. Leave your comments down below. And if you have an argument, if you think I'm full of shit, let me know. Maybe you'll change my mind. I seriously doubt it, though. Greetings, friends. I thought I would do something a little different this time around. Something, let's say, not scripted. I'm just gonna wing it. Now, lately I've been making videos, or in my recent videos, I've been emphasizing my contempt for modern paganism, let's say, or modern paganism, druidism, Wicca, stuff like that. The way it just, I think it's so phony. Now, there are people who abide by these philosophies that I personally like, I've met, liked, I've dealt with. They're fine as individuals go, but the crap they buy into, I don't get the appeal. Now, I've mentioned a few times my own personal journey, let's say, into the occult, and the way I was attracted to paganism, because, well, a lot of it has to do with history. I love history, and I love to tap into my, let's say, personal heritage. So I have a fascination with, let's say, Celtic mythology and, Celtic history and all that good stuff. And a lot of what is considered modern paganism is a really fucked up interpretation of druidism. Okay? It's some silly shit, I'll put it that way. Some feel good, Druids were a bunch of happy tree lovers who were, ancient ecologists maybe in their eyes, who loved the goddess and loved nature and blah blah blah, which is pure horseshit. And also, coming up within, I don't know, a couple of weeks from now, roughly 3 weeks from now, will be the solstice. Okay, the summer solstice. And in England, I don't want to call them half-wits, but anyway, they will go to Stonehenge, and they will gather in Stonehenge, and and chant and bang drums and do hallucinogens and dance around and whatever the hell hippies do. Now, I watched this recent video, I think it was done by Vice, where this young woman was interviewing different individuals. And one first guy she interviewed outside of Stonehenge, he didn't want to have to pay to park or some such shit. And so he stayed outside. He wasn't going to go into the gathering or whatever. And she asked him his name, and his name was Arthur Pendragon. I was thinking, well, that's fucking original. And then when she goes inside, she decides, okay, I'm going to find a real druid. Not just a partier, but a real druid. And she comes across this older, I don't know how much older he is, but gray-haired guy, whatever, looking like Gandalf. And she asks, well, what's your name? And he goes, my name is Merlin. I was just going, fuck. Where the fuck is the originality? Come on, you fucking people. And it was showing these individuals going up to the stones there, Stonehenge, leaning up against them and practically, making love to these things. And I couldn't help but think to myself, well, what if you were to take a Neolithic person, one of those who helped build this structure back 4,000 years ago, roughly, give or take, and bring him up to now. And let's say you could communicate with him and ask him, say, okay, that right there, that Stonehenge there that we call Stonehenge, what was that? What was it made for? What was the function of it? And let's say the guy goes, what, that thing? And he goes, that was a fucking strip mall. You know what I mean? What if it had just a mundane function? What if it wasn't this well they say, well, it aligns with the equinoxes, or excuse me, with the solstice, winter solstice, summer solstice, whatever, so on and so forth. What if that was pure coincidence? And it was, where, let's say, vendors gathered. I don't know. Anyway, my discomfort with these pagans, with their belief, is what they don't realize is they're viewing their pagan beliefs through a veil of Christianity. And most of you who are, let's say, pagan and are listening to this are probably going, what the fuck are you talking about? Those ancient pagans did not have that duality within their belief of good, bad. Now, the biggest problem with this modern pagan thing, whatever the hell it is that these individuals are afraid of reality and the reality of the self, and that big aspect of the self called the shadow. Now, the gods reflect aspects of the psyche. I've brought this up in many videos. And a huge aspect of the psyche is the shadow. And for an individual to be whole, one must come to terms with the shadow, or as Carl Jung put it, shadow integration. You must integrate the shadow. And for me, I guess it's just my nature. Fluffy shit, the singing and dancing, and like I brought up before, holding hands, That crap has no appeal to me. First off, I'm not collectivistic type. I'm not the feel-good type. I much prefer dealing in reality than pretend, if you will. When I emphasize the left-hand path, the aspect of the left-hand path I'm emphasizing is a deep primal road, I guess you could say, to the shadow self. It's a dark road. To me, it is reality. It's not what I want to be true. Sure, I would love to feel good and happy all the time. That would be wonderful, but in the end it would be hell. Think about it. It's like the Christian interpretation of heaven. It would be hell. My hell, at least. The way I would see hell. Because part of being alive is pain, is anger, is frustration. All those things. This is where I become, well, I get more into Nietzschean philosophy, let's say. These are all powerful aspects of being a human being, of being alive. And I feel that when your philosophy is to feel good, you lose touch with what it is to be human, truly real. I don't want to lie to myself. I'm not one of those who can lie to themselves. I know a lot of people have that ability. A lot of people have the ability to ignore their doubts, to believe shit because they want it so badly to be true. You know, they'll push aside any doubt they might have, suspend disbelief. I can't do that. So, for me, and represented in the sect, I'm trying to, well, I'm not trying, I am piecing together a connection, let's say, between the modern left-hand path with the ancient primal, with the primal self. Because for many hundreds of thousands of years, human beings lived a primal life. Civilization is unnatural. We have only been civilized for, what, at the most 6,000 years. Civilization originally popped up in ancient Sumeria, roughly 6,000 years. And even then, plenty of us, be it basically anywhere else around the planet except for maybe China and Egypt, were primitive. We were primitive people. And it's a part of who we are. It's innately, it's in us. It's in us. And we lived a brutal lifestyle. It doesn't mean I want to go back and live that brutal lifestyle where I'm constantly in fear of my neighbors, wondering if some other tribe's going to come over the hill and conquer my tribe. I don't want to live that lifestyle. But that innate part of who we are, we can't lose. It's still inside. And by pretending the gods are feel good, huggy kissy, fluffy fucking bunnies, you are lying to yourself. The gods are brutal, and they will always be brutal. And you can put a veneer of bullshit over them if you want. You know, you can make them glossy, you can turn them into cartoon characters, whatever. The gods are real. They are real aspects of who you are, of who we were. and we should never lose that. To be honest with you, one of the main reasons why I started the sect was to give back the horn god his testicles after being neutered by the modern pagans. And I've attempted to do the same for the Druids. Now, a little bit of my own personal history. I'm of mixed heritage, from English to Eastern European to Italian to Mexican to even some African. But my largest percentage is Celtic, from the Irish and Scottish branches on my family tree. And from this knowledge grew an obsession with all things Celtic. The color of my hair has lightened in my old age, but as a child it was bright red. Along with freckles and green eyes, I was the standard ginger, and I hated the way I looked. That was until I discovered the Celts. And having an obsession with the Celts and the occult, the Druids were a no-brainer. Now, as I've mentioned in a recent video, when I get into something, whatever it is, I like to dig deep. And studying what is known as modern paganism, I've come to realize it's actually a reworking of Druidism. That is what we can know of Druidism, because they left no written records. Now, some of you history buffs might bring up a crude form of writing the Irish Celts used called Ogham or but that was more a secret means of communication, a code, if you will, rather than a way of documenting facts. Now, instead of getting information on the Druids from the source, we've relied upon the Greeks and the Romans, enemies of the Celts, and most of what they had to say was not flattering. But today's interpretation of Druidism, those who call themselves modern Druids, they make me fucking crazy. Early on, I thought it might be interesting to join one of these modern Druidic groups, but how do you suspend your disbelief when you know it's all bullshit? Just a little digging and you realize they've whitewashed history by turning the Druids into jovial nature lovers. Just the fact they march around Stonehenge, which the Druids did not build, performing rituals and ceremonies created in the 19th century during what was called the Celtic Revival, is evidence enough. And in the past 50 years or so, it's become even more watered down when the hippies tossed in their pot-induced 2 cents. But where do we go to find evidence as to who the Druids really were? First, let's start with what we do know. The Druids were the Celtic priests, philosophers, judges, and soothsayers who convened with the gods and divined the future. They were political advisors who had influence over the decision of kings and chieftains. They were extremely powerful in Celtic society, a society known for its beautiful art, mythology, and warrior culture, and rumors of human sacrifice. According to Caesar, the Druids believed that the gods delighted in the slaughter of prisoners and criminals, and when the supply of captives runs short, they sacrifice even the innocent. Other Roman scribes claim that the Druids choose a person for death and stab him or her in the chest above the diaphragm. By the convulsions of the victim's limbs and the spurting of blood, they foretell the future. Now, was this true, or was this just anti-Celtic propaganda? The truth is, these classical reports don't even begin to compare with the gruesome evidence archaeologists have unearthed. In southern France, a Celtic sanctuary from the 3rd century BCE yields concrete evidence of severed human heads used in rituals. In this Iron Age walled fort was a cultic shrine where real and sculpted human heads were exhibited. In Britain in the 1980s, the bog mummified body of a Druidic sacrifice, Lindo man, came to light, killed about the time of the Roman invasions. Then came the discovery in the year 2000 of 150 human skeletons found in a cave in England. Evidence shows that the Druids may have killed their victims in a single event. It's possible that the Roman invasion itself was responsible for the escalation in the Druids' ritualized slaughter, according to the researchers. Did the Druids do this to appease the gods, to get some help against the Romans? Now, is it fair to judge the Druids through a 21st century perspective? No, it's not fair to judge any culture of the ancient past with the values of today. That's called presentism. The Celts were a people of their time, and no matter what the modern Druids and pagans might think, it wasn't a peaceful age of happy moo-moo-clad folk in tune with nature, hugging trees and prancing with bunnies. It was a brutal age where people did what they needed to do to survive. And if that meant appeasing the gods with human sacrifice, then so be it.
Thomas, when did you realize in your life, and how did it change your lifestyle when you first knew that our beautiful horned God is the Lord of this earth, or at least a partial architect of this 3D construct?
Wow. That's a big one. Okay, like a lot of people, I was a rebellious teenager who, after leaving the church, decided to go find something new to fill that void, if you will. And most of what I found, I felt was complete nonsense. It was silly. It was, moo wearing hippies dancing around in circles. It wasn't my thing. And like a lot of people, I discovered the Satanic Bible. Now, I'm a San Francisco native, so Anton LaVey was an institution in the Bay Area. Everybody knew who he was. And it didn't matter what bookstore you went to, his book was there, and a lot of times in the religious section, surprisingly. This was way back when. And also as a child, many, many times I had gone past his house, the Black House, because this foster home that I lived in, the foster mother used to like to shop on, I think it was a Sears store or something like that, on California Street or just off California. And that was where the Black House was. So often we'd pass by it, and most of the time she would clutch the steering wheel and her knuckles would turn white. And one time she goes, Tommy, an evil man lives in that house. And I thought, intriguing. I got to learn more about this evil man. So, late teens, I picked up the Satanic Bible. Besides that, I'm also a huge history buff. I'm obsessed with his history, especially ancient history. And because of that, I was somewhat drawn toward paganism, but not, like I said, the moo clad wearing type, you know what I mean? The soft paganism. I couldn't deal with that shit. And also being mostly of Celtic heritage, I got into druidism. And I quickly discovered that modern druidism, to quote the title of one of my videos, is bullshit. It was created in the late 18th century in Britain when they were going through their Celtic revival period. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of white-clad people marching around Stonehenge on the solstice and the equinoxes and so on and so forth, mumbling nonsense. And then later on, it got a really strong hippie vibe during the 60s. And just like I said, being the history buff that I am, I wanted a form of Druidism that was more like the way it should be, or at least the way I think it should be. Nature is neither good nor bad. You know what I mean? There's none of that Christian duality shit going on in nature. And if you are a truly nature loving pagan, let's say, you got to accept the dark side. You really do. Otherwise, you're leaving out half of basically of who you are. You know, the shadow side, if you will. In the ancient pagans, all what we know of the ancient pagan faiths, those gods were like human beings. They weren't like Yahweh or well, Yahweh's kind of a dick, but they weren't like Jesus. Let's put it that way. You know, pure and good and so on and so forth. Like an example, Odin, one of my favorite gods. Odin was a very, very dark god. He did some really fucked up shit to achieve what he wanted, and that was gnosis above anything else. He was willing to lie, cheat, steal, kill, you name it. But I think it was the 13th century, Snorri Sturluson, an Icelander, wrote down a lot of the early Norse tales, mythological tales in the Prose Edda and the Poetic Edda. And what he did is he turned Odin into sort of a Norse Yahweh. You know what I mean? Because he was a Christian. But we should be thankful that he at least documented these myths and so on. But anyway, and that's how a lot of people nowadays see paganism, as there's a light half and there's a dark half and so on and so forth. And because of that, I felt it was important to inject the dark half back into it. You know what I mean? Because we're living in a society where there is that stark duality between the two. Hence, individuals lack wholeness. So, and also, well, we had, how the sect started, the organization. We were caretakers on a winery in Northern California, just outside the Napa Valley. Which unfortunately burned down in one of the many fires we've had here in California.
We lived on that property for several years.
We owned a bookstore and so on and so forth. But anyway, we put on events. We put on a pagan festival. And
it's painful.
Well, it was fun. Most of the people were really cool, actually. Even though, they were kind of fluffy bunny types. But still, they were pretty cool. And it wasn't long after that, I was thinking, we need to give the horn god back his testicles, because their interpretation of the horn god was, let's say, the goddess's boy toy. You know what I mean? He wasn't that, he lacked an edge. Let's put it that way. So on November 1st, 2011, we started the organization to give the horn god back his testicles, if you will.